else about floodways?
Like right now, to get a conditional use permit or an interim permit, the DNR has to sign off on, you know, if you're in a floodplain or if you're.
Coastal.
I mean, the DNR already is involved in every single permit that you have. I mean, new conditional permits, new interims, the DNR is there and they gotta certify that the thing is protected or out of the floodplain.
DNR and CA, floodplains are such a case-to-case basis
Yes,
location.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
some are right next to lakes and streams.
It'd be hard to put, you know, I mean, the floodplain might be right there, but then you might go up and be up. So if you put a setback, it may have, you may need a bigger setback at some sites and less of a setback at another site, if it ever came to that.
Ron, you're soil and water, what do you think?
You know, it's just like Dan was saying, but each site being unique, or maybe Brian brought it up, I don't know, but it is just so unique here in Houston County. We're talking about flood fringe, floodways, you know, and everything, that it's almost site specific. To be able to put down a footage, whether it's, you're talking about the 100-year or the 500-year, would be difficult.
Would we need to have some sort of a baseline though, that you'd say if you are located in a floodplain, it's minimum this or something, and then having it site specific if you have to exceed that?
But we're also missing one thing, we do require that mile setback from most tributaries, and, which is gonna take all your floodplains out of it, if you adhere to the setback, so.
So you really don't need to add any more things because your setbacks are going to eliminate floodplains.
Yeah, majority of them, not all of them, but.
Yeah, I think down along Houston, down along that road, I don't know how far that flood fringe goes out. Does it go out over a mile?
Well, it's gotta be close, because my parents' house is in it, and they're like 9/10 of a mile from the river.
Yeah.
Well, it spreads usually from road to road. If you go down either side of the bluffs, if you go down between Rushford, go down, or if you go down from Hughes, or, and then come down 16 or across the other way, it's usually between the two roads. It's pretty much a, you can kind of take it as a floodplain.
Like you between 21 and 16, you mean?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. There's, you know, keep in mind, there is some flood fringe, a lot of flood fringe in that area too, besides the floodway.
Yeah.
But
Most of that is all in the floodplain down there, and the houses over, homesteads and that have been built up on higher ground, and that, you know, over the years, or that was intentional or whatever it was, you know, otherwise, your buildings would be gone every year since forever, and you'd never got
Some of our
anything
neighbors
done.
have them. Yeah, yep, you're right.
I really don't think we need to spend too much more time on this,
Okay.
because this is gonna be limited by a number of other issues.
This one is
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
do a
The
lot.
setback and the DNR is gonna,
All right,
yeah.
and we can move on. If you're ready to move on, we'll go to sinkholes, which only Fillmore County, as I recall, said anything about it, because nobody else thinks about it except really us, I guess.
I did some map investigation on that, you know, through both our soil survey and what we've got on our GIS, on our base map on our computer. And I couldn't get the answer as to who mapped those sinkholes that are showing up on there. And talking to some of the soil scientists up in Rochester, it seems like maybe there were some college students and et cetera throughout the years that have identified some of those sinkholes and have mapped them on there. But when you get into Black Hammer, Spring Grove, Wilmington, there's quite a few that are mapped on there. And then knowing, myself knowing where there were some sinkholes in that area, those weren't mapped. So the inventory that's out there is not complete. And I'm thinking when you get into Houston County, that cartography out there, that you're going to end up finding more. You know, if someone would decide to start, you know, a mine out there or anything, you've seen it happen already in Houston County. Somebody will come and say, "There's a sinkhole not far from there," and so I got an idea. There's a lot more will show up then you know.
Well, on the other side of it, you know, you look at sinkholes in this area, your map is probably something that's ever changing because of our area,
Right.
first area, so I
Right.
mean, it's,
Yeah, again,
we
they,
probably should have setbacks off of it.
yeah, even
No.
like in South Fork drainage here coming out of Caledonia, there's probably 2 or 3 appear every year because we're in this karst topography. So they're gonna continue to pop up here and there, but we've treated them with, at Soil and Water Conservation Officer, we've treated them with a berm, so we're right up to them. And some of them we buffer by 50 feet. So I don't know if that's going to be adequate, a 50-foot buffer from a sinkhole, or if we need to have more than that on these active sinkholes. That there again is open for discussion because it's a sensitive area, the sinkholes on.
I don't remember, I didn't read exactly what Filmer said. Do you have what this Filmer saw? Say on page 135.
We sealed a number of them. I mean, we've even treated them that way, and
We would have a couple of them every year.
How much success is there with sealing sinkholes?
it's been pretty good. I'd have to say that has been pretty good by using either plastic and then layers of clay and going down, or grouting the hole and doing that. But that doesn't mean that a sinkhole right alongside is gonna pop up next year, you know. So whether a person's really getting that much accomplished, you're just taking care of that direct conduit that's showed up. More so than the sinkholes, I'm more concerned about the fact that in a lot of Houston County, you've got shallow soils of bedrock. Just because there isn't a sinkhole there, that doesn't mean that there isn't potential for pollution because of our soils and the topography we've got.
So what would be the primary pollutants that you would consider with a sinkhole?
Well, when we're talking about sand mining, or
Yeah,
just?
with the mining, what would be our biggest, your biggest concern with sinkholes?
Well, seeing how we're not processing, you know, or worrying about some kind of chemicals and stuff getting to them, it'd be just, in my mind, would be the use of the area, you know, whether it's.
And any erosion or runoff that would go in there. I think that'd be the main concern, that if they're changing the topography, that it doesn't get changed in such a way to make that sinkhole an entry point, you know. So sinkholes would absolutely have to be protected, or have to be bermed, or have to be either filled and sealed or bermed, or they'd have to be dealt with. But if they were bermed, I would think, you got 50 feet now, Ron?
If we buffer them,
If
we
we
do
buffer 'em.
50 feet. If we seal them, we're right to them. I mean, we work through them.
And we have locations all over the place where we have roadways on top, like there
Yeah.
are roadway ditches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places where we don't have 50 feet, but ideally you berm 50 feet around it.
What happens when they find sinkholes next to a new feedlot? What happens there, Rick? If that's identified next to where they're going to be putting in, they just call for more soils investigations to.
Well, there is setbacks from feedlots to, I forget, I think it's 1,000 feet. From a sinkhole, known sinkhole to a, like say, a new feedlot that's going in.
Because they're concerned about.
Yeah. But if, there again, like our area, you know, we do have a lot of these sinkholes sitting around here, but, there's a lot of remediation you can take to curb a lot of that. You know, just like what Ronnie's saying.
Yeah. Well, I think that if there's a sinkhole in question in the area, it's, first of all, it should be dealt with sealing, I would say. Don't you think, Ron?
Yes.
And then once you seal it, you still would mark the area and put a berm around it. So I think you need to do two things if you're running into a sinkhole. You need to seal it to soil and water conservation specifications. and then you need to berm it and mark it and stay away from it. Probably. I don't know, you probably have more experience with this, Brett. Well, you two guys have more than I do. Have you sealed, you haven't had them, let me ask you, either one of you, I mean, if you seal them, do you see any?
Well, a setback from a sinkhole isn't going to help. I mean, just, you know what I'm saying, staying back from a sinkhole with a setback isn't going to help. You have to do something,
Yeah, with
you know, to prevent it to get to the sinkhole.
Yeah,
That's true, yeah.
The water contaminants off the
Right.
sinkhole area, so as long as there's mounted draining away.
So I'm leaning more towards treating the sinkhole, that needs to be addressed in any plan of operation.
And then what about this buffer business?
Well, there again, you know, the buffer, if a grass buffer, they've got that option, you know, to put in a 50-foot grass buffer next to that thing. And so that would be addressing it, you know, if they're going to address it.
So they do either or?
Yeah, I assume they have to confront the problem or address the problem through either a buffer. And if you want the buffer to be more, you know, if they decide not to berm it or not to seal it or whatever, then the buffer needs to be greater, I'm thinking, than 50 feet. And I think we should be talking 100-foot setback if they don't, but I'm sure they'd take the option to seal it or berm it.
Should I change the number again, but it is in the bottom of that sheet.
Well, I think I like the sealing it, and, you know, the distance isn't as critical as sealing, keeping the water away, because we're not talking about chemicals on the sites that are being run onto the sites. It's all natural material, natural soil.
Yeah, I agree with you. You should seal it, because you don't want any water to it. Of course, all runoff eventually soaks to the ground and goes down to the groundwater. But, I mean, if you're in a high-activity area, it should be sealed.
Don't give them the option then.
Yeah, I would say seal it.
Seal it, period.
No
It's not that
buffers,
difficult to.
just seal?
Seal it or
Well,
berm
do
it.
you wanna say within a certain distance of the mine? I mean,
Yeah, you have to do that, yeah.
say anything within, I don't know,
Any sinkhole within, well, maybe a quarter mile, back to your 1320. Any sinkhole within 1,320 feet needs to be sealed.
I can live with that.
Let me ask you, that ceiling, can you guarantee that it's totally sealed, or should you seal it and put a buffer, just
You want to do both. That's-
Seal it and berm it.
seal it and berm it?
Seal it and you put buffer.
well, if you use the soil specs, soil conservation specs there, as far as sealing it,
What soil conservation has.
yeah.
But you still mount, you have a buffer of 50 feet or 100 feet, you know, smaller area.
What does sealing it mean?
They basically reach down as far as they can get with excavation equipment, see if they can find that void in the rock. And if they find it, then they'll grout it. Then they'll start coming up with layers. Clay, maybe 2 foot of clay, black plastic, 2 foot of clay, black plastic, till they get back up to the surface.
Right, a little bigger rock, and keep a smaller rock as you go up. Depending on what you
Fill in
find.
the hole.
Okay, now, how would that work out? If we seal all the sinkholes